Hey everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Crime. This is the final part of Bardstown Mysteries. In the last 4 episodes, we've discussed the unsolved disappearance of Crystal Rogers and the unsolved murders of her father, Tommy Ballard, fallen officer Jason Ellis, and the double homicide of a mother and daughter, Kathy and Samantha Netherland. But wait, there's more. Let's go back to 1990 to look at a 30-year-old cold case. Lucinda Strange was a wife and a mother who went for a walk on her road in Bardstown on March 25, 1990. She never returned home. Her daughter Allison was only 16, just a junior in high school. She says that her and her mother had just started to grow more of a friendship than a parent-child relationship. Allison and Lucinda worked together at the Holiday Inn restaurant in Bardstown. They had just gotten off their last shift together and went home. Allison was studying for a test and Lucinda went on her daily walk. Only 10 minutes later, someone came knocking on the door, saying someone had been hit by a car. Lucinda was really the only one who ever walked on their secluded rural road, so Allison immediately knew something happened to her mother. Allison called 911 and her father, Lucinda's husband, Jerome Strange, found his wife's body in the road. He found her radio and headphones broken right next to her. He covered her body with his coat until help arrived. At first, it looked like a hit and run, with the broken radio and headphones, but when Lucinda's body was brought to the medical examiner, it was determined that she was stabbed 40 times in the chest and back. She bled to death only 200 yards away from her home. Based on her injuries, the medical examiner explained that the killer had come up from behind her. There was a large bruise on her shoulder, indicating that someone grabbed her from behind and started stabbing. Now, there's not that much information on these cases, so let's go into the theories of Lucinda Strange. The first one was, of course, drugs. Supposedly, there had been a drug bust at the Holiday Inn a week prior to her death where both Lucinda and Allison worked. People suspect that Lucinda saw something, or she was the one who tipped off the police, or at least that may have been what the killer thought. Lucinda's mouth was also cut open pretty bad, so maybe this was the killer's sign to shut her up. Apparently the police looked into this, but who really knows if this is true or not. The brutality of this case also suggests that this murder was personal and possibly by someone she knew. You don't just stab someone 40 times and not have a feeling of rage inside of you. The fact that she was found so close to her home just minutes after going for her walk suggests maybe someone was lying in wait for Lucinda. Allison says she pretty much walked daily, so maybe they knew her routine. The case went cold when tips stopped coming in. Jerome Strange, the husband, tells WDRB, quote, "You want them locked up, but it's not a revenge factor. It's so they can't do it to another family. I haven't given up all hope, but it's just pretty low right now." Unquote. Allison, who is now married and has children, pleads with the public to have closure and asks anyone with any information to come forward and talk to the Kentucky State Police. It's been 30 years with no answers for Allison. But the next unsolved murder wasn't Jason Ellis in 2013. It was actually a father and a dedicated worker, Daniel Cahoe, in 2012. Daniel was a twin to Roger Cahoe and Joan Hagen in Bardstown. His twin brother was also named Roger, but he went by Alan. Daniel was known to be a bit of a drifter, always just going with the flow and enjoying the outdoors. But when he had a son in 2002, Daniel Jr., he definitely tied himself down more. He got a job working for a distribution company and also at a butcher shop that he worked at for 10 years. The last time Daniel saw his father and son was on Christmas Eve. He went for a holiday dinner and told his dad he'd be back tomorrow. He never came. Even though Daniel was known to go his own way, he never left his family like that. He always celebrated with them for the holidays, so the family grew concerned, and for a good reason. They called his phone, he wasn't answering, and they called his friends to see if they had seen Daniel, but they all said no. His friend Donald also said that he was supposed to come over for Christmas, and he never did. They assumed he went off on the grid hunting or fishing without telling anyone. Then on December 31st, Daniel's twin brother Alan was shot in the stomach. It was some kind of domestic dispute that led to the arrest of a man named Edward O'Brien. Alan recovered from this shooting in the hospital, but when family attempted to reach out to Daniel again, he still wasn't answering. They knew if Daniel heard his brother had been shot and was in the hospital, he'd be there immediately, but he never showed. On January 5, 2012, Tammy Atcher was driving up to an abandoned tobacco farm on Bowman Road in Spencer County, a neighboring county to Nelson. When she started to approach the abandoned farm, she and another passenger noticed that there was a large hole in the barn door, and then they saw a body inside. There was no ID on this unidentified body that was later found to be Daniel Cahoe. He had been shot once in the head, execution style. Kentucky State Police and the Spencer County Sheriff's Office labeled the death as a suspicious homicide, and it was clear that Daniel was driven to this barn to be executed. Daniel didn't drive, so it was strange to the police and the family how he got to a different county where it appeared he didn't know anyone there. The medical examiner discovered that Daniel was probably killed 3 days before his body was found, on January 2nd, 2012. Police first theorized that maybe Daniel saw something he shouldn't have in the woods, and that's why he was killed. I just want to know why this is always the go-to theory, especially with police, that someone quote-unquote saw something and that's why they're dead. I mean, clearly something's going on here if all these people are dead or missing because they saw something. I just don't get it. Police have not released what type of gun Daniel was shot with, if he had any drugs in his system, or if they had any possible leads. His family says that he wasn't into drugs, he smoked a little pot here and there, but it was nothing serious or expensive. But his family does say that it's not impossible if Daniel got into the wrong crowd days before his death. A theory that the Unresolved podcast brought up was a case of mistaken identity. The fact that his twin brother Alan was shot 3 days before Daniel was killed makes things a little weird. O'Brien, the one who shot Alan, claimed that he shot him because Alan was arguing and harassing his girlfriend. Maybe someone heard about this and tried to defend a woman they believed Alan wronged, but really he shot Daniel instead. O'Brien was in jail at the time because he was a felon with a firearm, so he could not have been the one to kill Daniel. I wanted to bring these cases forward because no one talks about Daniel Cahoe as much as the other 4 unsolved cases, but I think Daniel could be somehow connected, in my opinion. It also really bothers me when I hear all the time now, there's 4 cases in 4 years, and actually there were 5. There's just 4 high-profile ones, and I feel so bad for Daniel's father, Roger, because he's really tried to put the word out there, but it just seems like it goes unnoticed. In 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016, there's 5 unsolved murders and 1 unsolved disappearance that's being investigated as a homicide. Let's get real. How does this happen in a town of 14,000 people? I would like to know. Daniel's father, Roger Cahoe, tells the Kentucky Standard, quote, "I know Daniel's murder isn't high profile, but he was still a person. I just hope that we can find these people who did this. I think they're cowardly people, and if they did it to my son, they'll do it to somebody else's. They have no remorse for life, unquote. He also sends a message to his son's killer, quote, "Why would you take someone's life over a little money or something like that? That's if he owed them money. I've heard it was drugs, I've heard it was stealing, but I've never known the boy to take anything. He worked for all kinds of rich people that had money. He stayed in their house and they trusted him. I just don't think he stole anything. But no matter what it wasn't worse than taking someone's life. I'm not after the people who were with him. I'm after the guy who pulled the trigger," unquote. Once again, if you have any information regarding this case, it was right around New Year's in 2012. Please come forward to the Kentucky State Police Department. So, speaking of police departments, let's go through some Bardstown political history because this gets interesting. Let's just get to the point. Something is very clearly wrong here, and I'm mentioning that over and over and over again, but once we get into this next part, it all makes sense, in a way. Not really. Whether it's the police or the judicial system or the politicians, someone's hiding something, in my opinion. So let's go through the corruption timeline, which I shouldn't even have to say, but here we are. In March of 2014, Bardstown police officer Tony Satterlee resigned after being put on administrative leave in January 2014 for multiple drug charges. An internal investigation began and he was indicted on 10 counts of prescription drug fraud. Allegedly, he possessed over 1,800 hydrocodone pills and over 200 oxycodone pills. Another Bardstown police officer's wife, who worked at Tony Satterlee's doctor's office, became involved during a hearing for illegally prescribing Satterlee these pills. But Satterlee was actually the one to approach this woman and also 5 other sources. Satterlee's defense attorney claimed that he fell into a drug dependency after a work accident where he was given painkillers. This is a tale as old as time, and I'm not going to discredit Tony Satterlee for falling into this dependency. It happens, and it happens very frequently. But at the same time, you're also a police officer, which doesn't excuse drug addiction. Addiction affects everyone in all walks of life, whether you're rich or you're poor. So I'm not going to accuse Tony Satterlee of being this massive drug dealer and doing things he shouldn't have been. I mean, he shouldn't have been doing this, but I'm going on a rant here, but addiction affects everyone. That's just plain and simple. A lot of people speculate that Tony Satterlee could be responsible for the death of Jason Ellis because he was investigated less than a year after Jason's murder, but I'm not really sure about this. I truly do believe Tony had an addiction to painkillers that was more personal and professional than the street drugs Jason Ellis was responsible for. 2 years later, in April of 2016, Bardstown Mayor John Royalty quote-unquote reconstructed the police department without asking the police chief, Rick McCubbin. He claims that he has the full authority to do this, which he does, and basically he just didn't see the point in talking to McCubbin about this. He tells WDRB News, quote, "McCubbin was upset with the way that it was done, and rightfully so. I would have been upset too," unquote. A city councilwoman also spoke out against Mayor John Royalty that he ran on the basis of transparency, but wasn't being transparent at all. She said, "I'm concerned that within 6 months, McCubbin will be gone." Royalty said that he wanted to focus more on enforcing city ordinances and fighting the drug problem, which I totally understand. I mean, you have a police officer who was arrested or indicted on 10 counts of drug prescription fraud. That's a problem. Royalty also announced that he is promoting Detective Mackenzie Mattingly, who used to be a Louisville police officer and a former Bardstown police officer. But this Detective Mattingly doesn't have the greatest past as a police officer. Wave 3 News reported in 2004, quote, "As the investigation into the shooting of a 19-year-old drug suspect continues, there are new questions surrounding not only Officer Mackenzie Mattingly's actions the night of the shooting, but his behavior while working on another police force as well. At the time, he called himself quote-unquote Mad Dog Mattingly on business cards he handed out, unquote. And what does Mattingly's former boss in Louisville have to say about him? He said that when Mattingly reapplied to come back to the Louisville Police Department, quote, "I will never consider hiring Mr. Mattingly for any position with the Louisville Metro Police Department," unquote. The Courier-Journal also reports, quote, "The 19-year-old suspect, Michael Newby, was shot in 2004 as he and Mattingly struggled over the officer's service weapon during an undercover drug buy attempt. During the struggle, the weapon discharged, causing Newby to run. Mattingly then shot Newby in the back 3 times, unquote." Now, I understand that this is controversial, especially with the current political climate right now, but Michael Newby was a black teen, shot in the back 3 times. Another fun fact about Mayor John Royalty is that he was also kicked off the Bardstown Police Department for violating a use of force policy in 1998. So how did he become mayor? Like, how? Well, here's how. The only reason why he was elected mayor was because when Bardstown police officer Jason Ellis was murdered, Shekels' own nephew, Mayor Shekels' own nephew, a member of the Bardstown Money Gang, confessed to killing Officer Ellis multiple times. I know we talked about that in the Jason Ellis episode, but this is how this mayor became elected. Although former Mayor Shekels had no personal involvement with the Bardstown Money Gang, he was scrutinized for having a family member claiming he killed Officer Ellis. Citizens started to resist his policies, and when Kathy and Samantha Netherland were found to be murdered, the public was outraged, not only at Mayor Shekels, but also the police department for failing to keep them safe once again. Just months later, as election season heated up, City Councilor John Royalty joined the race for mayor against Shekels and won. 3 days after Mayor Royalty made these changes to the Bardstown Police Department, without Chief McCubbin's knowledge, Rick McCubbin retired. He released a statement that night saying, quote, "After much consideration, meeting with the mayor and those closest to me, I have made the decision to retire as the Chief of Police of the Bardstown Police Department. As you are aware, the past events and restructuring of our department has caused much attention, as I have stated that I did not agree with the direction that has been published in a directive by the mayor," unquote. He was Bardstown's chief of police for 5 years before retiring. People loved him and his efforts to find Crystal, even though Bardstown Police wasn't the lead agency in her case. He was also the one who made the recommendation for Nick Houck to be fired, not tolerating his intrusion in finding Crystal. Following this, Detective Mattingly became interim chief. In June 2016, Mayor John Royalty fired the police department's assistant chief, Thomas Roby, after he allegedly shredded police documents and deleted everything off his computer. What did Tom Roby have to hide? These documents included Drug Task Force files, internal affairs on former and current Bardstown police officers, and other documents that belonged to the city of Bardstown. Was he scared of what happened to Tony Satterley would happen to him too? Was he trying to see if Jason Ellis was doing any internal investigations, as many people suspect? Who knows? Now, this police officer was also Tommy Ballard's brother-in-law. Tommy died just a few months after this. People say that Tommy's sister, also a former police officer, had no knowledge of what was going on, but we don't know. A year after Chief McCubbin retired from the Bardstown Police Department, WHAS reports, quote, "For the 3rd time in the past year, the city of Bardstown has a new police chief," unquote. For the 3rd time. That is crazy. How do you go from having a police chief for 5 years than having 3 in 1? How corruption is my opinion, and Bardstown officials are corrupt. I think I've laid that out pretty well here, and that's pretty undisputed. The current Bardstown Police Chief, Kimberly Krasik, who is a retired assistant chief of the Louisville Metro Police Department, has stayed on since 2017. The interim chief at the time, Captain Marksbury, who was the chief before McCubbin, told WDRB, "I think the city made a very good hire." Then, in October of 2017, Mayor John Royalty was indicted on multiple charges of perjury, false swearing, and 2 counts of official misconduct. Former Mayor Dixie Hibbs says, quote, "It seems like when he became mayor, he wasn't opening to listening to others. That's what got him in trouble," unquote. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into the drug world of Bardstown. This is crazy, y'all. On January 26, 2019, Salvatore Carolla called 911 saying that his roommate had been shot on Boston Road in Bardstown. The alleged shooter, Justin Hardin, who was from Alabama, was caught by state police in Elizabethtown following a high-speed chase. Now, if you remember, I was talking about I-65 going from Chicago to Alabama, and it also hits Bardstown. Now, you may be thinking, okay, yeah, so this person was shot? Just wait. About 2 weeks before the shooting, Hardin allegedly went to Carolla and his roommate's house with over 40 pounds of marijuana to be distributed. Hardin returned to the house on January 25th to get the money for the marijuana, which he told police he did not receive, so that's why he shot them. In one interview with Kentucky State Police, Hardin said he made his money by quote-unquote running drugs and that he was responsible for making drop-offs and collecting payments. The Kentucky Standard reports, quote, "Hardin made frequent references to a third party, including a few references to working with a drug cartel, though he refused to give police further details. At one point, however, Carolla told police a Hispanic male accompanied Hardin to the home during his initial visit to drop off the marijuana and followed behind them when they delivered the marijuana to an out-of-state location. Hardin also said someone would likely be back to collect the payment and that he feared for his safety," unquote. Hardin was arrested and charged with 2 counts of attempted murder, burglary, theft of a firearm, and possession of cocaine. When police searched the residence, they found in the basement a marijuana growing operation and numerous items related to marijuana cultivation. So Carolla was also charged for this. Hardin's case was actually dismissed because of delays in court, which is why I also say I think that the judicial system is also corrupt. So he's out. That's good to know. Obviously, there's some cartel activity going on in Bardstown, and these theories are not just a hoax that people throw out there. This is real-life stuff going on. Here's something else for you. From Wikipedia, quote, "The Cornbread Mafia was the name for a group of Kentucky men who created the largest domestic marijuana production operation in United States history," unquote. They were based in Marion, Washington, and of course, Nelson counties, all located in central Kentucky. This mafia was revealed in 1989 when 70 men had been arrested for organizing a marijuana trafficking ring that stretched across 30 farms in 10 states. Do you know how crazy that is? Like, this had to be huge. Now, I've heard mixed reports that they were non-threatening, and other reports say that they were violent. There's actually a book on this mafia saying that they would have bodies in their trunks, but also donate to their community. I'm just pointing out that this activity does happen in Nelson County. I think Tommy Ballard was looking into these ties and found what he called bigger than Kentucky. Now, I don't think that the cartel or the Cornbread Mafia as a whole put on some kind of hit on Crystal, Tommy, or Jason, or Daniel, but I think they could be a part of why they were killed. You never know who's involved in these types of things, like police officers, maybe, allegedly. So let's get into the theories one last time. It's obvious a lot of people think that the cops are involved with drugs, not only because people believe that Jason Ellis was killed by someone on the inside, but a lot of people think Nick Houck was a dirty cop. Okay, I'm going to put this out there right now. This is what people think. This is people's opinions. There is absolutely no evidence to say that he was a dirty cop involved with drugs. The only thing you can put on Nick Cahoe is the fact that he was fired for interfering with an investigation. But here's something I saw someone post on Reddit. Quote, "It doesn't have to be a drug ring run by dirty cops. All it has to be is a drug business that's paying off some dirty cops for protection. That's a story as old as a drug trade. That extra $2,000 a month and your career, not to mention possible prosecution, is plenty of incentive to sidetrack any investigation," unquote. And someone else replied in this thread saying, quote, "When you throw out there the concept of the police running a drug ring and being its own organized crime family, that's treading into territory that the average person finds rather far-fetched. Not that things similar to that have never happened, but if you're talking about protection, it's something that has literally accompanied virtually every drug operation in every place in every time. Police running their own drug ring, while not unheard of, is much less documented," unquote. And I'm totally on board with this theory. Something's going on, and it started even before Jason Ellis's murder with Daniel Cahoe, in my opinion, which is why I wish more people talked about his death and their connection, maybe. These targeted shootings of Jason Ellis, Tommy Ballard, and Daniel Cahoe just seems too weird. I understand that Daniel wasn't shot from afar, but it does seem he was coerced to somewhere to be killed and executed. Just like Jason, I mean, he was basically coerced to get out of his car. I find that a little weird. Sherry Ballard also agrees that Crystal's, Tommy's, and Jason's cases are connected. Many locals believe that Jason Ellis was gunned down by a fellow police officer. It's possible he was getting too close to uncovering a possible drug ring covered by dirty cops in the area. Sherry has said that she believes her daughter overheard something regarding Ellis's death and was killed by the Hauk brothers in an effort to keep their secret. She also believes that her husband had gotten too close to discovering similar information and was met with foul play. So I have theories too, and you all know I love to talk theories. I totally agree with Sherry that Crystal's, Tommy's, and Officer Ellis's cases are connected, and even the profiler on Oxygen said that this was possible too. I am curious if Daniel's case could also be connected, as in being involved in the drug world. I wonder the same thing about Lucinda Strange. Did someone think that she was a rat? However, I also don't see the connection with the Netherland murders. Samantha was a straight-A student, was just known to be a good, responsible young girl. This was personal for her, and I want to know who was in her life. Even if they don't seem like a killer, you can't see a killer from the outside, probably 90% of the time. People try to make the connection with Kathy teaching Jason's son because Jason did have a son with special needs, but Jason did not live in Bardstown, so I assume his kids would have gone to another school. I've seen some other people say that as well, and also the fact that the Netherlands have said that Kathy did not know Jason or Jason's son. I believe whoever came to the front door asked Kathy for help, and she obliged. I think that this was a distraction, and that's when her and her daughter were attacked by multiple offenders. I wish I had more information on that case, especially the car. I find that so intriguing, and I wish they could make a license plate out. I mean, if you look closely at that car, it also looks like, to me, there's 2 to 3 people in there. I'm not sure. So here's what I think happened to Crystal. Sherry Ballard tells Shay McAllister that Crystal spoke to her about Brooks' tax returns, which is why I believe the IRS was searching his house in August of 2020. Crystal told Sherry that Brooks was lying on his tax returns and she had them hidden. Did Brooks ask her to hide these, or did she hide these for leverage? And where did she hide them? Sherry Ballard says that this is the one question she would have asked if she had the chance to go back. I've seen some people speculate that they may be in the storage unit she owned that is now being searched by the FBI for the first time. The FBI has also said that they have brand new evidence and new tips that have never been out there before. Now, this makes me believe that finally people feel comfortable talking as long as it's not to local law enforcement. I also wonder, as I've said before, if the FBI is not only there to solve Crystal's case, but also to look at the possible corruption in Bardstown. It's pretty well known that Crystal planned to leave Brooks that weekend. She had tried to leave before, but Brooks told her that she wouldn't be able to see her son Eli if she left. This is all according to Sherry Ballard. Sherry says, quote, "I think Brooks had connections that made my daughter scared," unquote. So what kind of connections is she talking about? Well, you know what you don't put on your tax returns? Drug money. Allegedly, possibly, Sherry says that a lot of people paid Brooks in cash for his properties, but what if the cash wasn't for the rental properties? Like I said, I've seen Brooks and Nick were doing a little something with those rental properties, allegedly. Something else happened while Crystal was here that I also find very strange. Allegedly, Brooks asked Tommy's sister, Teresa, about the details of her sister Sherry's murder in a Walmart. Like, literally in a Walmart, in front of all these people, and Crystal was even there. Teresa was so upset by this that she walked away crying and later told Tommy and Sherry about this interaction with Brooks. When Tommy remembered this encounter, he and Team Crystal they went to revisit the site where his sister's remains were found. They said that they didn't find anything, but I just couldn't imagine having to say she could be here. My daughter could be where my sister was found. That's just awful. I don't think Brooks allegedly asked about the murder to copy it, but how to get away with it. I also think, though, that maybe he did eventually copy it and had the same fate as her aunt. I think Brooks took his brother in as an accomplice and burned Crystal's remains. I'm so sorry, that sounds so grotesque, but it's just, I really do think that this happened. With all the burn piles and the fact that Brooks was so adamant about being truthful about a fire, I find that incredibly strange. I believe that they hid evidence such as a murder weapon either in the barn or at Melody Lake, which is why cadaver dogs had indicated at those locations. Detectives in Crystal's case theorized at first that Crystal found out about something that Brooks and Nick didn't want her to know about, and he attacked her, if you remember Nick's interview with Kentucky State Police. And when Nick asked these detectives why he would be involved and why he would use his cruiser to move a body, they said that it was the best way to go undetected. I know I keep bringing that up, but I was just stunned with that. I'll never forget. I also believe whoever killed Tommy Ballard also killed Jason Ellis. I am one of those people. The way it was done, you can't change my mind on that. They were just too similar. It's also very possible that Bardstown has a serial killer on their hands, and I don't think that ever leaves the community's mind. Members of the community actually prefer to believe these cases are connected rather than believe that there's some sporadic serial killer living amongst them. But that's it for this series. It's been a wild ride, and I want to thank everyone who's stuck by me this entire time. No matter how far-fetched it seems to get, it just also seems to come full circle, in my opinion. I'll say it over and over and over again till I'm blue in the face. Something's happening in Bardstown, and I just hope one day these cases are solved. Thank you so much for listening to Bardstown Mysteries. This is Let's Talk Crime, and I'll see you next time.